Hello and welcome to Gatecrashers. And today we're exploring Gate 42, the Gate of Growth, and we meet Barbara. Barbara's kitchen table told a story. Not a short story, not a tidy story with a clear beginning and a satisfying middle and a neat resolution. A story of the sprawling, ambitious, and gloriously unfinished variety. The kind that keeps acquiring new characters and subplots and interesting diversions before the original plot has been properly resolved. There was the watercolour set open, brushes fanned out in a way that suggested recent and enthusiastic use. Next to it, a library book on fermenting that had been renewed twice, a notebook with Garden Phase 1 written on the cover in Barbara's large, committed handwriting, and three separate lists that may or may not have been related to a decluttering project that had begun sometime in the autumn and had since become itself a thing that needed decluttering. Barbara sat down at the only available corner of the table, moved a half-finished jigsaw approximately 4 inches to the left, and began her morning coffee with the serene expression of someone who sees no problem whatsoever with any of this. It's all in progress, she would say, if asked, which she was, regularly. And she wasn't wrong, exactly. Everything on that table was genuinely in progress. Barbara hadn't given up on any of it. The novel existed at chapter 7 with real momentum. The garden redesign had been thoroughly researched and would be spectacular when phase 1 eventually concluded. The letter of complaint to the council about the roundabout was nearly ready to send, and had been nearly ready to send for approximately 3 years, and remained, she felt, nearly ready. It was just that Barbara had recently also joined a community choir, signed up for a pottery class, and agreed to help organise the village fete. One thing at a time was something Barbara interpreted as one more thing at a time. The experience was always the thing for Barbara, and this, once you understood it, explained everything. Most people move through life with an eye on the destination, the completed novel, the garden in full bloom, the result, the end point, the thing they can point to and say, done. Barbara moved through life completely immersed in whatever she was doing, fully present, fully feeling, every sensation of the process registering as something worth attending to. Not analysing, not cataloguing, just living it with every part of herself. The destination was almost beside the point. The experience was so full. This was not laziness, this was not disorganization, though it occasionally wore that disguise. This was Barbara experiencing things in precisely the way she was built to experience them, completely, feelingly, with her whole self present in the process. The abstract circuit that Barbara moved through was a circuit of experience and reflection. It ran through the solar plexus, that great emotional wave that needs time and privacy to settle before its wisdom becomes clear. Barbara couldn't rush to the conclusion of a thing because the conclusion only made sense once the experience had been fully lived and then, crucially, reflected upon, sat with, allowed to settle. Barbara didn't abandon things, Barbara was still feeling them. The kitchen table was, in this light, less a monument to unfinished business and more a very visible record of a life being thoroughly lived. This did not entirely explain the cutlery drawer. Now, it should be noticed that not every Barbara arrives at this the same way. There is another kind, quieter about it perhaps, but recognizable if you know what you're looking for. This Barbara also has this gait. She also moves through experiences with that same quality of full immersion. But this Barbara has learned through some combination of circumstance and conditioning that endings are not just elusive, but threatening. To end something is to lose it. To close a chapter is to admit it's over. And so this Barbara holds on, not from enthusiasm, but from grief. The unfinished project kept alive, not because there's more to experience, but because finishing it means saying goodbye to a version of life, a version of self, a version of possibility that felt, while it was open, like it might become anything. This Barbara's table is quiet. The projects are old. The dust has settled in ways that suggest they haven't been touched in some time. Same gate, completely different texture. One Barbara can't stop accumulating, the other can't bear to let go. Both are learning in their own way that the ending is not the loss of the experience. It's the moment the experience becomes wisdom. It was Celestine who changed things for Barbara. Celestine had the particular gift, rare and occasionally uncomfortable, of saying the true thing in the kindest possible way. They were sitting at Barbara's kitchen table. Celestine had moved the watercolours to find space for her teacup and was looking at the table with the thoughtful expression of someone reading a very interesting document. "How's the novel?" she asked. "Ah, in progress," said Barbara. "And the garden?" "Whoa, phase 1 is essentially planned." "And the roundabout letter?" "Oh, well, that's nearly ready." Celestine stirred her tea. "Barbara," she said with great gentleness, "when did you last finish something?" Barbara opened her mouth and then closed it again. She thought about this with genuine attention, which was characteristic of Barbara. She could not be accused of doing anything shallowly. She thought about the correspondence course, the decluttering, the jigsaw, the fate committee, the choir, the pottery, the novel, the garden, the letter. She thought about how each new experience had arrived with such force, such immediacy, that the previous one had simply been absorbed into the background, still open, still technically in progress, still quietly waiting for its conclusion. And she thought, for perhaps the first time, with real honesty about what that actually cost her. Not just in the accumulation of unfinished things on the table, but something harder to name, a kind of low-level drain, a weight that didn't announce itself loudly but was always there. The energy that should have been released when a cycle closed correctly, the clarity that should have arrived when an experience was properly completed and its wisdom extracted, all of it suspended, held in a kind of permanent, almost done state that served nothing and no one, least of all Barbara. "What happens," Celestine said softly, "when you finish something?" And Barbara sat with that for a long time. What happened was, it was over. The experience, so full and so alive while it was in progress, became a thing that had been, past tense, concluded. And something in Barbara, she realized, had been resisting that with considerable creativity for quite some time. "I think," Barbara said slowly, "I might be afraid of the ending." "I think," said Celestine, "the ending might be the best part." Barbara looked at her. "It's where you find out what it meant," Celestine said. "You can't know what an experience gave you until it's finished. The meaning is the closing." Barbara looked at the kitchen table, at all the open, living, breathing, unresolved things on it. And for the first time, she felt them, not as a gallery of possibilities, but as a collection of conversations that hadn't quite reached their conclusion. She picked up the watercolor brush. One thing at a time, she thought, and began, for the first time in a long time, to finish. Gate 42 lives in the sacral center in abstract circuitry, the circuit of experience, of the collective learning that comes from living fully and reflecting honestly. It sits in the channel of maturation with Gate 53, the gate of beginnings, and together they hold the complete arc of the cycle. But Gate 42's particular territory is the ending, the correct closing of what has been opened, the completion that releases the wisdom of the experience and makes space for whatever comes next. Abstract circuitry runs through the solar plexus, which means there's no truth in the now. The meaning of an experience cannot be grasped while it's happening. It requires time and retreat and reflection. The wave needs to settle, and when it does, what emerges is something that can be shared with the collective. The distilled wisdom of a life genuinely lived, offered to everyone who comes after. This is Gate 42's deepest gift, not the experience itself, though Barbara is fully and beautifully present in every experience she enters. The gift is the ending, because it is only in the correct closing of a cycle that the next one can truly begin. The experience fully completed releases its wisdom, the lesson lands, the growth, that word in the gate's name that can be so misleading. The growth is not the accumulation of more and more open things. It is the depth that comes from one thing fully lived and properly closed. One thing at a time, not as a limitation, as an instruction in how to make a life that actually means something. These days, Barbara's kitchen table has a little more space on it. Not much. Barbara is still Barbara after all. But the novel reached chapter 8 last Tuesday. The garden has moved into phase 2. The roundabout letter, and this Barbara feels deserves full acknowledgement, has been sent. The council haven't responded, but that, Barbara has decided, is their cycle to complete. She has a pottery class this evening and a choir rehearsal on Thursday, and somewhere in the cutlery drawer there is still something that needs attending to. But Barbara has learned something that the kitchen table is slowly beginning to reflect. That every experience she has ever thrown herself into, every beginning, every glorious, immersive middle, has been quietly waiting for its ending all along. Not to be lost, to be understood. One thing at a time. Barbara picked up her keys, stepped over the jigsaw, which was, she'd decided, going back to the charity shop on Saturday, and went to make something with her hands that she fully intended, this time, to finish. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for meeting Barbara with me. And until the next time, and as always, love yourself and go gently.